Hello and welcome to the Written to Speak podcast, a podcast that seeks to share hope and announce love through conversation, poetry, and other words. It's me, Tanner, your host, and we are back with another episode of the Written to Speak podcast. And as always, we're glad that you are here. And as always, the music that you're hearing is from our friend Matthew Daring. Matt has been helping give Written to Speak a beautiful sound, and as always, I'm thankful for him and for his talents. Before we go any further, I owe you all an update on the book. As many of you know, my first book, titled I'm All Over the Place, a book of poems, prayers, and wonderings, is set to release later this year. And we are so close to having a release date, and soon pre-orders will be available. I'll first make the announcement for those of you who have subscribed to the weekly email, the Written to Speak weekly email. So make sure you go ahead and head over to writtentospeak.com, sign up for that, and you'll be the first to know when all of that is ready to go. But I have seen the cover, the inside of the book, and guys, it is a real book. We're coming out with a real book. And anyways, I'm excited about that. But we are in the month of April, which is National Poetry Month. And if you didn't know that, that's okay. I didn't know it either. But this is why we have the internet. The internet just tells us these things and we say, okay, I guess that's true. So it's National Poetry Month. And on the podcast today is Levi the Poet. And just like his name says, he is a poet. And Levi was actually one of the first people to show me that spoken word poetry was a real thing. And we talk about that a little bit in our conversation, but I have been widely influenced by his work and his words. And when I first started this podcast, I knew that I wanted to have him on. And so we were finally able to make it work. Levi and we talk about writing, poetry, what it means to be a writer, and all the struggles that come along with writing. He is brilliant, and I know that you will take a lot from our conversation. So with all of that, here is my conversation with Levi Macallister, or as you may have heard of him, Levi the Poet. But other than that, welcome to the Written to Speak podcast, man.
Thanks, man. How long have you been doing this thing?
You are episode 9. So okay. I told myself, I was like, I'm going to do 2 a month. So I think I kicked it off last November. And last month I did like 1. But it was just one of those things where I was like, I enjoy having these conversations and I want to be able to share it with people. And everyone else has been doing podcasts. And I was like, maybe that's something that I should be doing too. I kind of fell into that. But, it's been fun to do. But mostly I've just had on my friends. So you're actually the first person who I don't really know be on the podcast. Which
that's great.
Yeah. And so for your introduction, how do you like to be introduced?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, Levi the Poet person guy.
I saw you tweeted this the other day, and I wrote it down. It says that you're a poet, a copy and content writer by passion and vocation, husband by grace, cat owner by obligation, enjoys coffee and movies starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
That's it, man. That's it. I was on this panel at this like tech conference, and I've never been on a panel at a tech conference. I have no idea about any of those things. And I was like, do I go super serious on this? That's just not me. I'm just gonna not do that. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great introduction.
Okay, so favorite The Rock Johnson movie. What do you got?
Oh, man. Okay, well, so The Rundown I have some pretty amazing memories of, like watching it and laughing with my dad. Yeah. There's this one scene, and I don't even really remember what it is. Sorry, you know what? Hold on. Let me just shut this door really fast. Sorry. Yeah. I know we're on here. All right. Yeah. So these brief interjections to whoever's listening or however this gets edited. My wife just surprised me by getting me a dog, which is incredible. Yeah. Like it was our. Well, we didn't plan on working it out this way. It just so happened that the timeline all lined up. But so we were celebrating our 8-year wedding anniversary.
Awesome. Congrats.
Thank you, man. Like a week and a half ago. And yeah, so we went to this lady's place, and I got to pick out the dog. And then last week, while I was out of town at that tech conference, Brandy went and picked him up. So
What kind
he's
of dog is
awesome. A Labradoodle. He's super cute, dude.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I'm excited about it.
What'd you name
It's funny
him?
because thus far his name is Francis.
Oh, yeah, I like that.
We need to decide before the end of the week. I thought it'd be funny to call him Frank. It reminds me of Donnie Darko and also the Punisher. And but also for somebody, I was talking to my Fraction Club members about it, and one of the guys was like, "Oh yeah, Saint Francis is the patron saint of animals."
Yeah,
like I can't get any better.
Yeah.
So anyway, maybe Francis, but also maybe Falcor because he looks exactly like the Never-Ending Story creature. So we'll see what ends up happening. But at any rate,
that's
he's
amazing.
Dope, but he's a handful. So anyway, yeah. So all that to say, we were out of that conference, and it was like, this just isn't like me to actually try to say something incredibly serious about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go. But favorite Dwayne. Yeah. So the rundown's a good one. There's a scene in there where I honestly don't even remember what it was, but I remember laughing so hard with my dad one night watching it that we woke my mom and sister up in each of their separate bedrooms. And then they had no idea what was going on, but walked out into the room and just started laughing just as hard because that's what we were doing. So that was a fun one. But then last week we watched Jumanji, which I kind of swore I wasn't going to watch because
I heard it was like strangely good.
It was great. It was so fun. And I think that's the thing about him. I mean, it's a joke. Like I could definitely pick other people whose movies I like more, but he's just such a hilarious personality to me. Like he's so every line is a one-liner that's just the most ridiculous thing, and I don't know. So
have you seen his new show on NBC? It's like the Titan Games where he hosts it.
No, that's amazing. I feel like that dude is doing a million things all at the same time.
He really is. I think he touches pretty much everything that happens in Hollywood.
He's the highest paid actor.
Yeah.
Ever.
He passed
right now Sandler. Anyway. For the last, yeah, I guess so. That big Netflix money for those B movies that Adam Sandler's been up to lately. But
they're almost close to being almost good.
Yeah, I kind of feel sad for the guy, but maybe he's just freaking loving his life and just killing it and just having so much fun and no pressure. You know,
I hate to plug other podcasts while on a podcast, but have you listened to Conan O'Brien's podcast?
No, I didn't even know he had a podcast.
Yeah, his podcast is called like Conan Needs a Friend. But he had on Adam Sandler a little while back, and Adam Sandler's interview was perfect. He just seems like the most like relaxed guy. I had this one this is who I thought Adam Sandler was. Listen to the interview, totally changed my mind about who he was.
Okay.
It's
amazing.
It's hilarious. So if you're listening, go listen to the Conan O'Brien podcast. I want to go back to something that you had just said though. You said that you're not a very serious person, so you don't want to be introduced like that. But if anyone were to listen to any of your poems or read any of your stuff, Levi, man, it's a little serious.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny, man, like speaking of podcasts and things like that, because a buddy of mine, his name's Mark Brower, he lives in Ohio, and I met him through Levi the Poet. He's been a fan forever, and then we became friends. And but he has pushed me so many times to do a podcast, or speaking of hopping on the bandwagon and things like that, because he's just like, dude, the people who like what you do really like what you do, but it's hard for a lot of people to get into it because of how serious it is. And you should just do something else that's more of your actual personality, which is funny because like the writing and stuff is totally me as well. But I just find that unless I'm working on something like that or have something really intense to say, I'm probably a lot more goofy than I remember when I first started trying to make jokes at shows and people were like, I don't even know if we're supposed to laugh. He's probably tricking us. He's going to make us feel bad soon.
I was just crying and now I'm laughing.
To me. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's definitely true though.
Yeah.
I mean, I struggle with my own share. I think a lot of the writing and art comes out a lot of the struggle. And I, certainly have my own share of those, but at least when I'm in a good headspace, I'm pretty giddy and goofy about whatever. So yeah, it's good.
I've started to try to like write jokes into like sets, so like in between in poems, and now like and we can talk about the creative process, but over the years my writing style went from being like I have to be very serious, like just super serious, but that's really not me at all. But in my writing, it is. And so like when I'm on now, when I'm on stage or sharing stuff, it's like in my I'm writing new poems now, and I'll like put jokes into them. And so people are like, oh, okay, we can laugh. Okay, it's not all just like serious, dark, or like weird type stuff.
Yeah.
But
I think the first time that I ever even experimented with that was in correspondence, because there were some bits that were just like not even jokey per se, but they were just like less into, I don't know, even if it was like a pop culture reference or something like that, just having something different than, all right, go to your darkest place possible was, and it was really fun for me. And I did that in, It's All Worth Living For too, even though that was like a National Suicide Awareness Prevention Week. I mean, you could go like real deep on that stuff. And I think it did that too. But then talking about like Superman and terrible cups of coffee, I don't know, just like I've been trying to experiment with doing more things like that in my own writing as well, which has been nice because I used to not think that I could do that at all,
Yeah. So how long have you been doing poetry? How long have you been Levi the Poet? Because Levi the Poet is not your real name?
Levi Macallister, full Scott, whitest white person that there is.
Is that what your 23andMe said, or did you just?
Oh no, I just know it. Like my mom's a McEwen and my dad's a Macallister, so that's what I've got in me, But yeah, like 10 years this summer. July of 2009 was the first tour that I ever did. I probably did a couple of local shows before then, although I honestly don't know if I called myself Levi the Poet then. It's not true. I think 2009 was the first time I actually started playing shows though. And then the first tour I did was in July, with In the Midst of Lions and this band called All or Nothing. That was a hardcore band from Northern California. So all very weird, but
that's awesome. 10 years, and your work has changed. I don't want to say drastically over the years, but like you're not yelling as much as you used to anymore.
Yeah, no. I think, it's certainly drastic if you were to compare werewolves to cataracts.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be, I think that, I think it's been, sort of trend, hopefully some sort of different kind of trajectory that has at least not left everyone high and dry who was super into the old stuff or whatever. But you're right. I mean, it's funny, there was no yelling, I don't think, on correspondence. Cataracts, I kind of brought back a couple of things because it felt, like the actual expression of it. But I have learned over the years that always and only yelling everything all the time is also, there's I could just figure out how to use a different inflection or something like that to try to get the same point across instead of, bashing it into people. So, and I never really went into any style of record or anything like that with that as the goal. It was just sort of naturally the way that it came out of me. And I guess that has changed. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been following your work for, from the beginning. I don't know if I found you on MySpace.
Yeah. It's always something. Oh, no, sorry, Tanner, you cut out for a second.
Yeah, I was just, I think I found you on MySpace back in the day. I think my friends and I were like sitting around like after like something in school, and we were just like looking at videos, and one of yours popped up. But I think last week I was like, in preparation for this, I was like, I haven't listened to some of your older stuff in a while. And so I went back and I listened through Werewolves, and I was like, it still holds up. But then I went back and I listened to Correspondence and some of Cataracts as well. And I was like, man, your voice has changed so much over that time. And as somebody who I've been writing for publicly writing for like 6 years now, and I look back on some of the earlier stuff that I wrote and to where I am now, and the changes. Well, not only was it much needed, but it's like it's really cool to kind of see. Oh, this is your kind of style of writing now.
Sure.
For the people who are listening, who want to be writers, what's some advice that you would just give? Like, what's your normal writing advice to those who want to become writers or to be writers?
Well, start is usually what I say, because I think a lot of people, including myself, I mean, I have called myself a writer for a really long time, but only up until recently have I written really consistently, to be honest with you, unless I guess, well, and it depends on your definition of consistent. All I know is that for all the emphasis I put on myself as a writer, there were a lot of years where I didn't actually write as much as the title, like, because I read Stephen King's On Writing, and he's like, get up, write. That's it, yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm not waking up and writing. Yeah. So, okay, so I got to start doing that. And I have more and more, and it's come out in different ways. Sometimes it's Levi the Poet, sometimes it's Fraction Clubs, sometimes it's client writing, sometimes it's just me journaling. But I think starting is a good piece of advice, because I think I will get writing from a decent amount of people asking us, that question. It's like, well, have you tried? Because maybe you want to do this, but maybe you just think that you want to do this. Yeah. The same way with performance stuff. Like, how do I get up in front of people? Well, you just I just got up and you just eventually it's like, I just got to pull the trigger, and whether that's at a show or whether that's at an open mic, I did both of those things. And some people do that and they're like, yeah, I took your advice and it actually wasn't for me. So I'm not going to keep doing that. Yeah. But I think, as with anyone, doing it consistently, letting it suck, working on it more. Those also, though, to be honest, are only, I say recent in the grand scope of the last 10 years, but more recent disciplines, because I tend to be so perfectionistic and self-edit as I write, that a lot of times I don't really enjoy the process all that much. There's an author I really like, and I talked about this at that conference too. She says that she hates writing, but that she loves having written. And that's my experience a lot of times, It's like, I got to sit down, and it's so draining to try to pull this. It might have been. I mean, Anne definitely was the one that I saw share it. Yeah. I wasn't 100% sure if she was the one who penned it. Yeah. She's retweeting things all the time. So, but yeah, Anne was the one who I came across the quote from. I just am not sure who it belongs to.
Yeah. The writing process is difficult. When people ask me now, they're like, what's it like? Or like, why did you become a writer? And I was like, well, some days I wish I didn't. Some days I wish I would, but I would have much rather gotten into like physical fitness than writing. And I don't like physical fitness that much. Right. So it's like, it's a draining thing. So how do you, when you're not touring, how do you stay disciplined in your writing? Or you just really bad like that at like most of us are?
I historically have been really bad like that, where I don't. But I have learned, I would say that the last 3 years or so have been defined by a very slow process of self-realization and just, I'm not old, I'm 29, but spent 10 years on the road and trying to figure out how to maybe be on the road a little bit less. Not to say I don't love it, but just the place I'm at in my life and my marriage and all these things right now. And so, all that to say, discipline has had to come into a greater play than in times past, where I just sort of let it slide. And it's been really good for me. So lately it's looked like plotting out times for very specific things on a calendar. It's looked like reading a book called Getting Things Done by this guy, David Allen, who's the most corporate looking white smiley business cover book you've ever seen in your life. But it's been so helpful for me to be productive. It's looked like listening to my wife, who's been telling me all the same things for the last however many years, but you ignore the people closest to you and just get irritated at them, while some other guru is telling you a thing and they're like, oh, meanwhile, Brandy's like, yeah, I know.
I told you that for the last 10 years. And this,
well, yeah. And she's so good at it, Brandy is really, really good at not letting everything bleed into everything else. I'm not at all. I'm thinking about this while this is going on, and what should be versus what is. And, that's led to a lot of anxiety. And it's just like I've just discovered it's not a good way to live. So, unfortunately, for how much I love spontaneity and just doing whatever, which I really do, I just have realized I have got to start being more rigid about these things. And so specifically about writing, maybe that means, okay, from this time to this time, this is what I'm going to do. My phone's not going to be in here. Like my notification, I'm going to type on my typewriter. So there's no chance of me seeing any different things like that. And again, it's been a learning curve, and it's not, it's not, I would love for it to be way more dialed in than it is, but I've really been, especially at the start of this year, knowing that I was going to come, I was fulfilling all of my commitments out on the road, and then knowing, okay, I'm coming home for like a pretty significant, deliberate break from being out on the road, exploring some other options, just looking at things, and hopefully working on some Levi the Poet stuff at the same time, and knowing I've got to be smarter about this or I'm going to spiral out.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's good. I mean, and it's one of those difficult things. Like I said, like if someone be like, should I be a writer? Well, you might want to ease into it, because it does mess with your mind, and messes with your schedule, and it messes with your time. I know for myself too, like I had to buy a paper planner just so I could like write everything down. I sit in a corner and I tape things up on the wall, and it's like, okay, I know that in September I'm releasing this, so I have to take steps to get there to do that. And I think a lot of people just like look at writing and they're like, oh, they over romanticize it, which is what I do with a lot of my life too. But then I look at it closer, and it's like, oh, there's a lot of hard things to get this one thing out. Or there's a lot that you.
I mean, the last 10 years are the brunt of every silly joke about, oh, I wish I could sit around and do nothing and get paid for it. You're like, oh my gosh, I want to lose my mind when people tell me that. But at the same, but I mean, and it is a joke, and people, but it is interesting, totally, like what you're saying about, I don't know. It's just, and then also, I don't know how you are with your writing, but being a super perfectionist about stuff, I'm only, I've had to learn a lot over the years of, okay, this isn't ever going to be flawless, but it's going to be what it is. And so let's put that out there.
Yeah. I think, is it Seth Godin who just says, ship it?
Yeah, man. And we talk about that all the time. 100%. Doesn't count till it ships.
Yeah. And in the last year, I've been, taking a look at more of, do you know who Sleeping at Last is?
Oh yeah.
He is doing this thing where he is going through the Enneagram and doing all that kind of stuff, and like doing like one song a month. And like, can I do that too? Is that something that I can do? And it's interesting, and it's difficult because it pushes you, because for so long I was like, no, if you are an artist or somebody who puts something out, you put something out like maybe once a year, or like every other year. But it's like, what does it look like to just release? Like, what does it look like just to release one poem a month? Like what totally. Is that going to do? And a lot of them is like, that's where I was at that time when I wrote it. So just get it out there, because somebody might like it. A lot of people probably won't. That's one of my favorite things. Like when I go and do like, when I share poetry somewhere, and oftentimes I'll go into like schools. And so when I first started this, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be doing this for kids who are like 23 years old. But recently it's been like third graders. Like, oh wow, interesting. And so I've written some poems for them, but I'll go in there and I'll be like, how many of you like poetry? And a lot of them will be like, no, I don't like poetry. And it's like, that's fine. But then you share it with them and they laugh and they like it, and they're like, oh, okay. So I can do that.
That's my experience with poetry too.
Yeah. It's the strangest thing.
100%.
Okay. Like, let me ask you, do you like poetry?
I am learning to appreciate it more, which is a PC way of saying not a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like but also what is poetry has grown to encompass more things. Like, you're talking about how at the end of every episode you have, like, I'm not going to read a poem, but I'm going to read you a piece of writing that sounds like poetry but wasn't published that way. You know, so like when I think of poetry, I'm thinking of Conor Oberst's old Bright Eyes records that I used to listen to, or I'm thinking, you know, I mean, there's plenty of stuff, and like I said, I've grown to appreciate more. You know, when I was a kid, I didn't care about it at all, and I just wanted to write lyrics. Like the fact that I'm called Levi the Poet is pretty absurd, but funny. And so, you know, but if you're asking, hey, how often do you sit down and read poetry? No, never, never really.
I've tried to be somebody who's like, you know, I want to learn more about the thing that I do and the people who have done it before me. But like you, I'm more interested in the lyrics. I always tell people, they're like, how did you get into poetry? And it's like, well, I had a crush on a girl, first of all, and I wanted to write a song, but like, I can't sing. I've tried to play guitar. I can't do either of those, like not even close to being like, I'm not good at all. Right. And so I was like, well, I just really enjoy lyrics, and I enjoy how words can like shape us and move us. And I was like, I want to be able to do that too. And honestly, like I didn't know that like spoken word was a thing until I went to, so I grew up in Orlando, and I went to Write Love on Our Arms event, Heavy and Light. And Anis Mojgani was there. I think that's how you say his name, but he did 2 poems, and I was like, you can do that? That's a thing?
Yeah.
It's like, you can do that. And then, so I hopped on, and I dialed up to the internet back in the day, and I found some more stuff, and it eventually led to you. And I mean, honestly, I got to attribute a lot of what you have done to what I have done. Like you modeled something really great for a lot of us, and seeing somebody else do it. Oh, dude, of course. Well, seeing you do it made me believe, oh, maybe I could do that also. Like, maybe, which has been really funny because when I first started doing poetry 6 years ago, people were like, oh, so you're like Levi the Poet. And I was like,
well, I know people said the same thing of me about Bradley Hathaway, and it's easy but it's just like,
that's how it starts.
Who else are you? It's how it starts. And who else are you supposed to compare it to in the music scene, especially, which is where we all did our stuff? Where it was like, there aren't any. I mean, Anis. I mean, I agree with you, but I heard about him through Heavy and Light too, and that's more because I listened to the music that Jamie was bringing into Heavy and Light. You know, so. Yeah, I mean, it is laughable, but it's also like, I don't know how you avoid that. Everybody has to start somewhere. And if there's not that many other people to compare those people to, then you're the me without you, without the music guy. Oh, you're the Bradley Hathaway guy. Oh, you know, I don't know.
And it was kind of a compliment. You know, I thought it was
totally.
But at the same time, when people were like, oh, you're like Levi the Poet, then I thought and felt, well, I have to do what he is doing then. And so for a little while, I was stuck in this hold of like, well, whatever like you're doing, or like some other guys in the genre too are doing, I was like, I got to do that also. And it took me a little while to realize I'm not comfortable with that. Like that's where I started, but that's not the direction that I'm like continuing in, you know. But it was one of the things where like, I learned so much from your earlier stuff. Like I still go back to the poem Trees.
Man.
I think that was off of Monologues, but I was like, man, like that is a good, like I wrote a poem called Trees. And then when I released it, I was like, oh, Levi also did that. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. He'll never know. But anyway, we are. So, but I wrote, and I was like, but that's kind of where I started from. And then, when people talk about, you know, writing, like, why do you write? And when I go into these classrooms, one of the reasons why, like, I don't say no to going into classrooms is because I think that there's kids there who are going to be much, much better writers than I ever will be, but they just need to see it to be like, oh, I can do that too. And then hopefully they'll figure it out and be able to write something better. But dude, all that to say, like, awesome. I've been following your stuff for a while. That's no new news to you or to anybody else, but what you started and what you are continuing to create continues to just really transform lives and spread hope in a unique way. So,
Thanks, man.
Thanks for doing that. Anyways, let's not get all sappy in the middle of in the middle of this. I had a question for you, and it's kind of what we've been talking about. And this might sound weird, but what made poetry the right thing for you?
I mean, I joke that it's just because I couldn't play any instruments and couldn't join a band, and so I just started screaming instead. But I think, like, ultimately, So, I mean, we're talking about influences. I saw Bradley come through on a hardcore tour and loved it. And some friends of mine knew that I was a writer. Well, yeah, there it is again. I was a writer. I was writing. I guess that makes it. I shouldn't like split hairs over that. So I was writing. I have written for myself since I was in 5th grade, and all of that stuff was coming out in lyric or rhythmic form. And so I just started, I got invited to open up a show, and I did that, and then I kept doing that. And eventually it came to a head where it was like, okay, this has been fun. Am I going to keep doing this?
Right.
And if so, for how long? And, I don't know. I guess I'm still asking myself those questions, but at some point it became a lot more deliberate. Like, yeah, all right, this is fun, interesting, growing. I am going to keep hopping in these vans. I am enjoying the interaction that I get to have with people. And I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be at this point in my life. And so I kept at it. And over the years, the poetry, has grown to include music, and some stuff on Cataracts is even a little bit more hip hop. So, and I'd make a distinction between those things, because there was stuff that would line up really well on Cataracts, but I didn't write, or I'm sorry, on Correspondence, but I didn't write anything on Correspondence like to the beat. It was like I already had all of Correspondence written, and then we did music and made it match. For Cataracts was kind of the very first time that I went from, okay, I'm going to write this poetry and then we're going to do the music bit, to, oh, this poem isn't completely done, but the music is. So how can I make this a little bit more, song-like, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I never really have or had the desire to move in the direction of doing either straight up hip hop stuff or even full band stuff. Because for me, the only way that life makes sense and is affordable and creates any sort of sustenance is to keep it a solo thing.
Yeah.
But, long way of saying, I guess over the years it's sort of worked itself out, but I certainly never set out to be like, I'm going to be Levi the Poet for the next 10 years, or this is a calling that I feel on my life. Like I just sort of kept running with things. And hopefully that answers the question.
Well, yeah. And it's weird too, because have you just kind of come to the conclusion of like, well, I guess this is what I'm doing? Like, I guess this is my life. That sounds weird.
Yeah. It's always back and forth, man. I mean, and it's funny that we're talking at this point in time, because I mean, even just saying at the beginning of this podcast, hey, I'm taking a break from the road, is kind of like the most public statement that I've made about that. Like I've talked to my subscription members and Fraction Club people and let them know, hey guys, like I got to take a break for a while, and I don't know what that means. I don't think it's the death of anything, but I think that it is some sort of different trajectory. I think I don't know exactly. Like I hope I can tour. Like I'm going to keep. That's where it gets hard to say yes or no.
Right.
It's like, well, currently I'm still Levi the Poet, but I'm also doing like client work. Currently I'm still this, but I'm also, and this is honestly the first, I mean, full honesty, this is the first time I've done any of that extra stuff, for that whole time. But I also am enjoying different means of creating. And I'm also enjoying, frankly, having like, not that I think anyone else is putting this on me. It's probably more something I put on myself, this like constantly on, publicly interactive person.
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying like being at home with my wife and having a thing that I'm kind of, I'm still controlling it, I guess, but clocking in and out of. So there are different things where it's like, okay, I've been going really hard for a really long time. I'm super thankful for that and all of and everything that's from there. And maybe at some point in the future, I push super hard on the road again. But as of right now, I would love to be able to create from home. And Levi the Poet isn't going away, but whereas it used to look like full-time touring artist guy, at least for the present, it doesn't look like that. And that's been a really weird thing for me, to be completely honest. Sometimes it feels like something I'm mourning almost. And at other times it feels like no, this is good and healthy. And, when I started talking to some of the Fraction Club people about it, it was like, there's some mental health stuff going on. There's these different things. And I was kind of scared to share that stuff because I don't know why. I'm the guy who's always saying, yeah, share everything. But that doesn't make me exempt from being afraid of sharing it. But it's cool getting the feedback. It's like, yeah, man, take care of yourself and do your thing or whatever. So
now people are giving you
evolving kind of a thing.
So now people are giving you the advice that you've given them.
Yeah, and that's always the way that it ends up going. It's like, oh, hey guys, you're not alone. You either. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So, yeah, man. So it's been an interesting start of this 2019 year, all the way around. But
how much of this involves you turning 30? Because I'm 29 as well. I'll turn 30 in September, and my wife and I will talk about. She's excited to get older. And I'm somebody who's like, no, like I don't want to. How's that hitting you?
None of what I just said has anything to do with turning 30. I haven't even thought about those two things in relation to one another. But
I hope I didn't.
I've certainly thought. No, you didn't freak me out. But I have thought about turning 30, and and then my wife is 4 years older than me, and so I think that. Well, if you're asking about that, Brandy's like thriving and just freaking loves growing older. I struggle with it sometimes, but at least thus far, it hasn't freaked me out to the point. I have sad days and I have days where I overthink stuff, and every day is a day that I overthink stuff. But but for the most part, it's like, oh, it's okay. I'm here. Like, it's been an enjoyable couple of months of. This sort of what feels like a bit transitionary, and I'm glad for that and excited about what the future holds. And that doesn't mean it's not going to be, up and down, but I'm all right with it. That I turned 30 in July, so I've got a couple more months left of the old 29. But
everyone's been saying recently, like, dude, 30s are the best years. Like 30s are the best.
That's what I hear too, and from people, internet people, whatever, but friends and stuff too. And Brandy is just like, I'm more secure. And man, if that's true, I hope I can follow those trajectories because I'm way more insecure than I'd like to be. And there's so many things, where it's like, that sounds great. I mean, I'd love to experience that, even if it means adding another notch to the age belt. But that's great.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. And I think one of the things that you've done so well publicly is you've talked about the hard things. And so you have been like willing to be vulnerable with your following and with your audience, whether it's the stuff that you've written for like Triple X Church or Write Love on Our Arms, like those things. I think one of the things that you do as a writer, as an individual, is you just do a really great job of bringing up conversations of, hey, we should probably be talking about this. And as somebody who works in a church and who has worked a lot with like youth in the past, it's always been great because you have things that when people are going through something, you can just say, hey, maybe check this out or listen to this.
Sure.
Or but all that stuff can be quite exhausting, to be the one who is talking about these hard things. And whether it's just writing a post, but like there was hours previous to that of you either enduring what you are now writing and sharing about, or just like sitting down at the computer to write about all of it.
And I think I'm not trying to, that just made me think, like, I think another part of it for me too is if that becomes sort of the shtick, and I don't say that lightly. I mean that more for me, where I'm like, okay, I've done that over and over and over again. Then sometimes the sitting down can feel exhausting in and of itself, where it's like, okay, what are we going to talk about now? What else can I say about this? Or, and I really can't, I'm proud of myself to be able to say that I haven't just pushed stuff out there for the sake of putting, being the consistent content creator guy. Like, I always feel behind. I'm all, everything takes me a very long time, but I agree with, or I like what you said about that. 'Cause it can be like, all right, how deep do I have to dig to come out with the next thing that we're going to go through? And do I need like, and I think lately, how healthy is that for me if I'm just doing it for the sake of, I mean, I really love and care about the people who follow the things that I do. And but I do, and this is a conversation I've had with multiple people lately. I think that, if I'm honest with myself, I function a bit too codependently with that base. And the people pleaser in me comes out and wants it to be applicable to everyone. And some of what I'll read later on at the end of the show, I picked kind of because it has to do with that, so we can chat about it a bit more. But yeah, there's just so much more than sitting down and typing out a couple pages worth of stuff for me, for you. I know that you know that.
Yeah. And it is a difficult thing. Recently I've been not getting onto social media on Sundays.
Yeah.
Like
Oh, that's great.
I don't do that. And I know it hurts the algorithm, all that kind of stuff. I've been trying to be more disciplined as a writer, but also as a human being. And I think it's probably more important to be a disciplined human being than it is to be a disciplined writer. But like, when I get on to like, I told myself at the beginning of about a year ago, I was like, I'm going to try to write a single poem or something every single day. And I worked myself out doing that, but I learned a lot while doing it.
Interesting.
Like, hey, can I take a step away from this?
Yeah.
And it was like weaning myself off of something I was addicted to, because I craved the, I guess, the applause or the attention, or even maybe it was just like, hey, I put something up to put something up. But I always come back to, am I putting anything out there, or is it just like, is it anything? Does anybody care? Will anybody miss?
Totally. And it can feel, I mean, I've done the same thing. Like I'd like to be better about taking those kind of fasts when I'm in a healthy place, and not just when I know that I'm in a really unhealthy place and this is the only way I'm going to get out of it, which to me is almost embarrassing to say about something like social media. It's like, well, dude, just have the self-control to close your app.
Yeah.
But
like,
I don't know.
Knows exactly where things are. Like, it just does.
Totally. Yeah. And so there have been multiple times where, and again, you're talking about, and those are the other parts of the artist thing with this whole new oversaturated world, where I end up being like, well, if I'm not putting something out there, then it's going to just get lost. And if I just, but whatever, like you said, it has come to these places where, I've just realized, man, I got to delete this stuff and I'm going to be gone for a month.
Yeah.
So see ya. I don't know what to say to you about it. I know that this isn't the best growth thing, but I'm doing a DIY independent artist project. And if I had a team running social, then great, the team could do it, but they're not. And this is what I need. And I'm learning, I think. And so maybe that's the overall sort of like umbrella that the rest of the conversation can exist beneath, which is boundaries. And those are things that I have not ever had, literally. And I've found myself talking about them more and more because I'm learning more and more about how healthy it is to have them. But, so it's like, I'm sure everyone in my life has looked at me and said, Levi needs more boundaries. Like, I just know that's a no-brainer. And now he's finally realizing something. And hopefully it's not like, I told you so. It's like, oh, thank God. Maybe we'll hear less from this human. Maybe that would be great, And so I don't know. But yeah, man, it's an interesting...
It is
there's all kinds of stuff going on.
And it's such a weird world that we live in. And then when you fall into I am a writer, and what do writers do? Well, writers write, but now writers also have to share and build a brand, build a following. And like, I remember it was like 2 years ago, I Googled, because this is how I learned everything, right? I just Googled like, how many followers do I need to have to get a book deal? And it was like 50,000. And I said, well, this is never going to happen. This is not going to this is not going to be a thing. But it was just like, it's an exhausting thing. And I keep trying to come back to the things that I actually believe, and getting to, believing like how God sees me, right? Like my identity is in that. And then like actually try to take the advice that I have given all the kids who have been in my youth group or my camper group, and be like, your identity is in God. Like, be secure. You can be secure in that and then live inside of that freedom. But there's something deep within inside of me that's like, well, if this random stranger on the internet were to just like like what I do, I'll feel much better. And I hate that I just said that as a sentence, because but that's like the depth of all this. And so when people are like, I want to be a writer, maybe you don't.
Right. Well, and that's why that's why it's like, you sure? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
I think great. Like I wrote by myself, for myself, and absolutely no one else for years and years and years. And it was like the most therapeutic, good thing that I did.
Yep.
It's when I started sharing stuff that it became, it's fun. Have you ever seen those memes about just these absolutely, there's a meme I saw lately about this like piano player, and the top of it says like, I made my passion a profession. And then at the bottom it says, and I am desperately unhappy, or like a joke. It was a joke. Like it was like, like if you saw the cartoon, you'd get the temperament, but then the caption beneath it was like, how to tell you're a true professional. Yeah. And totally like I mean, it's not only that, like this isn't a pity party, but it's like, I mean, the grind is real. So, all of these delusions of grandeur that aren't dumb to have, you just don't know until you know. I had the same ones, and so I think that's where some of the I don't know, man. Start and see. But maybe the dream that you have isn't maybe this isn't it. I don't know.
Yeah,
and on the flip side, I want to encourage people to go after the stuff that they go after, because it's not a discouraging response. It's like, man, do it, try it. Like that's another part of not knowing until you know. Maybe it'll be the best thing ever. Try.
I hope people don't hear like who are like, I really want to be a writer, hear us talking about it, be like, maybe not. Never mind.
Yeah, maybe not.
I had a couple of questions that I had written down before this, and I think we just answered one. I was going to ask you, what's your least favorite thing about being a poet? And maybe we just talk about it. For me, though, it's when somebody says, when I tell them that, so I work at a church, but I also am a poet or a writer, right? And so like when somebody asks me, what do I do? Like, I just have to choose, like, people are just going to like, because if you tell someone you work at a church, there's like 3 responses, and like, all 3 are not that good most of the time. But when you tell someone that you're a poet, they're like, oh, are you a poet? And you know it? Like, stop.
Yeah. Pretty fun.
Yeah. You're a joke maker. One more question. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it is fun. Like, I think about coming back from a tour and going to the bank and having to like deposit tour money. Yeah. And people like you hold on to that for a month, so it builds up, but then it's got to last you for 4 months until the next tour or whatever. So you come back and it's like, okay, here's this big old bundle of cash. Like, you damn drug dealer guy. Like, who are you? Or whatever, it'd be like, oh, what do you do? And I'll be like, poetry. And for a long time that was like real, for whatever reason, it was like, it was so hard for me, because then I was like, I don't know how to explain it. I just yell things and talk and tour. I don't know. It's, stuff like that is just
they
funny.
say, they're like, oh, you do poetry? Oh, well, tell us a poem. I was like,
It
really isn't the place.
You're right. You know what? That is the least favorite. I'll give you that. Yeah. Oh, you do poetry? Oh, do one. Good, just do one. Just perform for me, you little monkey man. Go do it.
Yeah, it's like next time I think I'm just going to tell people I deal drugs, and maybe that would just be easier to say. Last question before we hop into the final 3 questions. What do you hope that Levi the Poet leaves behind?
Oh man, that's such a good question.
Thanks. Wrote it myself.
I don't know. I mean, the first word that popped, and I'm just trying to be better about going with my gut instead of overanalyzing it all, but I guess the first word that pops to mind is just like hope. Because I think I deal with so much hopelessness myself, and I think that that not aloneness that we talked about earlier ends up being the thing that most people most resonate with, because I have chosen through Levi the Poet to write about the things that I have. And you're right, it's not the goofiness, it's like the heaviness. And I guess I love being able to tell people that they're not alone. I love being able to tell people that there is hope for them beyond what we are able to see.
Yeah.
And I need to be as reminded of it as anyone. And if at the end of the day, it all ends up being like, I have faith beyond personally this life, but if at the end of the day it was all smoke and mirrors, at least we knew that together and we were together in it. And the world, especially right now, seems to me to be so full of cynicism and that void that you talked about having to tweet something into, and anger and self-pity people talk about being passionate about the stuff that they're passionate about because it's the stuff that they deal most with. And so maybe it's a reflection of all of my own internal turmoil or whatever, but I just have been so blessed to be able to, and I mean, what a word, blessed, but I really mean to be able to have the interactions that I've had with people and say those things. And then I think beyond that, be able to say, I don't know where you come from. I don't know what you hold to. I don't know what beliefs you have, but I think that there is mercy that exists beyond what we are able to comprehend. And I think that there is a lot of hope that oftentimes we can't see.
Yeah.
And so I think those are the depths of my heart in relation to all of this stuff and bringing up the turmoil and bringing up the ugly in order to hopefully see, even if it's just a bunch of people lamenting, they're not doing it by themselves in a closet, but also there's an end to that lamentation.
Levi, that was beautiful.
Good.
I think, and maybe you've written about this or talked about this before, but when I write, I often write what it is that I need to hear, and I'm learning more that other people need to hear that also, right? Like
that's interesting.
Yeah,
I will say that I would like to write more like that because like I said, the filter, editor, overanalyzer, critiquer in me, I think stifles a lot of the creativity that I would like to experience because I end up sitting down and thinking about the audience. And because that audience is a wide array of people with a wide array of convictions and faiths and worldviews, I end up kind of stifling some of the thoughts that I think could otherwise come were I to be more honest about my desire to get them out there. And so that's a cool thing to hear and one that I would like to strive more and more for. Because I think a lot of people look at the stuff that I write and, I mean, I've been told this over and over again. Oh, you're so fearless. It's like, I am not fearless. You have no idea how many rounds of how much of a tornado my brain feels like before I put out this thing that you think makes me fearless. So that's a cool way to write. I would applaud that.
Then we must approach this very differently because I'm somebody who, after I put something out, many times where I'm like, did I even think about doing that?
That's great.
And
I kind of love that though, man. I mean, it's like, I mean, I get that it would probably be great for both of us to hit in the middle. Yeah. Maybe we're on two sides of a pendulum and we could both use some of one another's practice, but it's cool.
Well, it's like when me and my buddy, my friend who does all the music for what I've been doing recently, when we get into the studio, and by studio, I mean his guest bedroom, I'm like, hey man, if we spend more than a half hour like doing this, we're doing something wrong. And I'm just like, and like when he's working on like post-production music stuff, I'm like, hey man, as simple as possible and as quickly as you can do it. Because part of me, maybe I'm impatient, but I also think like, you're just going to do your best work right away. And I understand that's like Swiss cheese. There's a lot of holes in that, but I'm like, I just kind of want to see that.
That's a Tim Ferriss tip right there, man, where he's talking about like, you'll get your best work done if you give yourself a 2-week deadline instead of a 2-month deadline.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I'm the slowest. I mean this. I'm like the slowest moving person that I know. So,
But then when you get out there, I mean, and this is sorry, but like this is a testament to the last couple of albums that you've put out, or even the blog posts that you posted before, man. Like it's solid stuff, and so like the work that you have put into it, like it definitely reflects that. But also maybe just get more out faster.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a good challenge. I mean, I certainly am not the teacher here. I don't know, but yeah, it's great.
Anyway, man, let's move into the last part of the podcast. So what we've been doing is these 3 questions. And the first one is, okay, Levi, you can only send 1 tweet. What does it say?
Yeah. So I feel like this is a cheeseball answer, but again, going with the gut. Literally the first thought that came to mind whenever you asked me that was a Bible verse. It'll be easily retweetable for all of the Christians out there. But also hopefully, so I think the thing that is most significant to me and that I continue to come back to about my faith, who I believe God is found in Hebrews 4. It talks about the suffering and sympathetic servant. And I feel like that, so last tweet from Levi the Poet instead of Levi Macallister. I don't know. Like, I don't know who this comes from or exactly why I feel like it's so resonant, but I feel like it summarizes what the LTP project has been in that it is like, seeks to empathize with others and do that through suffering, and also know that there is grace in the midst of it. And I really do, man. Like that continues to be a main thing that I come back to when I, am feeling blind. And also, I just think like one of my favorite attributes about who I know God to be as this incarnate person who is with us in the midst of our not aloneness. And so I really think that is probably, I feel like it's a kind of a cop-out answer, or it feels real cheeseball to me. But I also think like, I don't know, that's the first thing that came to mind. And it's one of my favorite things that I cling to in the midst of not clinging to a lot, especially when I'm really, in a spot. So I think that's it.
I like that. And honestly, your work does a really good job of reflecting that, of acknowledging that this world is dark. There's hope.
Good.
Good. So that's awesome. Next question is, and don't hear me skipping over the Bible really quickly. I just don't want to take all of your time.
No, it's fine.
What's the book that you've given away the most?
So it's funny. It's a book called How We Love. It's by a couple, and it's funny because this has literally been since the beginning of this year. And so it's not like been a lifetime giveaway. I just discovered it lately, but it's made a huge impact on my life. It's called How We Love. And then the subtext is Discover Your Love Style, Enhance Your Marriage.
Ooh.
And Milan and Kay Yerkovic, basically they're a couple of counselors who have worked specifically in attachment theory over the course of their career, as in where you came from determines how you are. And it has been so enlightening to me. I know Enneagram stuff is really popping off in the world right now. I like that as well. I think it's been very beneficial, but sort of the way that I have described this book has been where the Enneagram sort of helped me understand how I am. This book has helped me understand a lot more of why.
Ooh.
And I just feel like it has been one of the most freeing sort of discoveries that I've come across, and I was stoked on it. So I bought a ton of copies, and I'm still buying a ton of copies and just giving them away to people that I love and think would stand to benefit from it. So How We Love by Milan and Kay Yerkovic.
Okay, so you brought up the Enneagram. What are you?
Oh, a 9 wing 1.
9 wing 1. Oh, I'm a
9 wing 1.
2 wing 3. So we're right close to each other.
Nice. One of my good friends. I mean, whatever. That doesn't matter. Yeah, 3-wing 2, other way around. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's funny that you say that because I was actually thinking about that in relation to your. Oh no, let's just get it out there, and to your even having any idea who Seth Godin is.
Yeah,
that seems to be a very 3 thing to know. I mean, I know that everybody gets into rash generalizations, but that's funny. That's cool. Yeah, 9-1. Brandy is a 1-2.
Oh yeah,
and so we got some pretty polar opposites going on. But say that again.
Is the 9 the perfectionist? Is that
No, the 1 is the perfectionist. The 9 is the peacemaker.
Yeah. Oh,
so you hear all of that coming out in my
I do
editing in process. Yeah,
I do. The Enneagram was, and I know I think I've talked about this on like every podcast, but like it's fitting because I'm a Christian who has a podcast. So you kind of have to talk about like the Bible and the Enneagram these days, but it has been one of those very transformative things. And that's why I talk about it so much. It's been for my wife and myself, but it's helped me identify some things in my life. And I've been able to apply that to relationships, but also to like my writing style as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Share.
Yeah.
Well, this really isn't a question, but do you have a poem to share with the podcast?
So I've got this thing came to mind, and I think it's it's kind of about what we talked about earlier. It's not a poem, and it's definitely going to be longer than 30 seconds, but I'll gladly read it if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, go for it.
So and hopefully there's no copyright things here. Hopefully, people can just read this woman's book. But it's the last little bit of a chapter. Of a book called Gift from the Sea by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. A good friend of mine gave it to me, and it's this woman who she like takes a vacation in a cottage by the sea, and she writes all of these chapters based off of the names of different shells that she finds in relation to who she is as a writer, as a mother, as a woman, as a person. And I think I really resonated with this bit. So just a little precursor to this very short chapter. She's talking about our ability to relate to many people versus just a few people, which I think is interesting in light of our conversation about social media and this weird culture that we live in where you got to try to please everyone and be relevant to everyone and not make anyone upset. And, all this different world. And then also in the midst of all of that busyness, what the present moment feels like. And both of those things are much of what I've kind of been trying to explore personally over the last couple of years and more, I think, as I get older. So, so this is that, and it's not a poem, but it's poetic in its own right. And I think it's good. So there's also words that I may not say correctly, but I'm just going to go. I pick up my Cecil bag. The sand slips softly under my feet. The time for reflection is almost over. The search for outward simplicity, for inner integrity, for fuller relationship, is this not a limited outlook? Of course it is, in one sense. Today, a kind of planetal point of view has burst upon mankind. The world is rumbling and erupting in ever-widening circles around us. The tensions, conflicts, and sufferings, even in the outermost circle, touch us all, reverberate in all of us. We cannot avoid these vibrations. But just how far can we implement this planetal awareness? We are asked today to feel compassionately for everyone in the world, to digest intellectually all of the information spread out in public print, and to implement in action every ethical impulse aroused by our hearts and minds. The interrelatedness of the world links us constantly with more people than our hearts can hold. Or rather, for I believe the heart is infinite, modern communication loads us with more problems than the human frame can carry. It is good, I think, for our hearts, our minds, our imaginations to be stretched, but body, nerve, endurance, and lifespan are not as elastic. My life cannot implement in action the demands of all the people to whom my heart responds. I cannot marry all of them, or bear them all as children, or care for them all as I would my parents in illness or old age. Our grandmothers, and even, with some scrambling, our mothers, lived in a small circle, small enough to let them implement in action most of the impulses of their hearts and minds. We were brought up in a tradition that has now become impossible, for we have extended our circle throughout space and time. Faced with this dilemma, what can we do? How can we adjust our planetal awareness to our Puritan conscience? We are forced to make some compromise. Because we cannot deal with the many as individuals, we sometimes try to simplify the many into an abstraction called the mass. Because we cannot deal with the complexity of the present, we often override it and live in a simplified dream of the future. Because we cannot solve our own problems right here at home, we talk about problems out there in the world. An escape process goes on from the intolerable burden we have placed upon ourselves. But can one really feel deeply for an abstraction called the mass? Can one make the future a substitute for the present? And what guarantee have we that the future will be any better if we neglect the present? Can one solve world problems when one is unable to solve one's own? Where have we arrived in this process? Have we been successful, working at the periphery of the circle and not at the center? If we stop to think about it, are not the real casualties in modern life just the centers I have been discussing, the here, the now, the individual and his relationships? The present is passed over in the race for the future. The here is neglected in favor of the there, and the individual is dwarfed by the enormity of the mass. America, which has the most glorious present still existing in the world today, hardly stops to enjoy it in her insatiable appetite for the future. Perhaps the historian or the sociologist or the philosopher would say that we are still propelled by our frontier energy, still conditioned by our pioneer pressures or our Puritan anxiety to do ye next thing. Europe, on the other hand, which we think of as being enamored of the past, has, since the last war, strangely enough, been forced into a new appreciation of the present. The good past is so far away, and the near past is so horrible, and the future is so perilous, that the present now has a chance to expand into a golden eternity of here and now. Europeans today are enjoying the moment, even if it means merely a walk in the country on Sunday or sipping a cup of black coffee at a sidewalk cafe. Perhaps we never appreciate the here and now until it is challenged, as it is beginning to be today, even in America. And have we not also been awakened to a new sense of the dignity of the individual because of the threats and temptations to him in our time to surrender his individuality to the mass, whether it be industry or war or standardization of thought and action? We are now ready for a true appreciation of the value of here and now and the individual. The here, the now, and the individual have always been the special concern of the saint, the artist, the poet, and, from time immemorial, the woman. In the small circle of the home, she has never quite forgotten the particular uniqueness of each member of the family, the spontaneity of now, the vividness of here. This is the basic substance of life. These are the individual elements that form the bigger entities like mass, future, world. We may neglect these elements, but we cannot dispense with them. They are the drops that make up the stream. They are the essence of life itself. It may be our special function to emphasize again these neglected realities, not as a retreat from greater responsibilities, but as a first real step toward a deeper understanding and solution of them. When we start at the center of ourselves, we discover something worthwhile extending toward the periphery of the circle. We find again some of the joy in the now, some of the peace in the here, some of the love in me and thee, which go to make up the kingdom of heaven on earth. Our waves echo behind me. Patience, faith, openness is what the sea has to teach. Simplicity, solitude, intermittency. But there are other beaches to explore. There are more shells to find. This is only the beginning. And that's the last part of her book.
Wow. So she wrote.
It's so good.
She wrote that while looking at the sea. I think I needed it. I think I know where I need to go to write now.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing, man. My friend Julia Fitzhugh gave me this. She's a writer as well, and I wrote. Wow. Julia helped me with. Well, help me is an understatement, but I wrote Bluer Eyes in the Fall Season based off of some of her experience in journals and things like that she allowed me to pen that piece off of for old monologue stuff. And then just recently she gave me this book. So Gift from the Sea by Anne Mara Lindbergh. So beautiful. And each chapter is kind of a separate thought. It's not like one long thing. It's just like, it's so good. And I love that chapter very much, especially the parts about, because I struggle with that, man. Like the, being all things to all people, and I know that that's pulling it so far out of the context, but just that's how do you love the mass? How do you actually can you, those are the things I get wrapped up in. And I just thought she articulated it very beautifully.
Yeah, and it just sounds like, we don't have to get into this, but it just sounds like the end of exhaustion and the beginning of something more. I wrote this, I'm just going to share this really fast. But I wrote this poem and I'm posting it tomorrow, but I don't know when we're posting this, whatever. But it just says, I'm tired of trying to be everyone and anything to everyone and everything. Will you remind me that you created me to only be only me, that I can only be me. And it's just like, I think a lot of the poetry that we write is in some form or another, a prayer of some sort, or like a letter to God. Yeah. No, that was really good, man. And honestly, like, I can't thank you enough for, first of all, for the words that you have written and shared, and the ways that you've been vulnerable with your audience, and that includes me as well. And your words just have had such a huge impact on so many in a positive way. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
I really appreciate that.
You bet. Thanks for reaching out and letting me be a part.
Oh yeah, man. Anytime. I was bummed we weren't able to get you down here on your last tour.
I know. Yeah, that's all good.
We'll figure it out one of these days.
Such as tour life.
Before we say goodbye, go ahead. Would you talk a little about? Plug yourself a little bit. Share where people can find you, but also I know you're doing some really awesome things with Fraction. If you want to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, sure. So, if you want to find anything from Levi the Poet, then just search Levi the Poet. That's the .net is the website, and that's all of the handles for anything and everything associated with this project. So thanks for that. If you do, the Fraction Club is. I love it. I think the best way to describe it is probably my own version of a Patreon model, but I just didn't go that route and decided to, just treat it differently, do some of my own thing. And so that it's, as of now, the sort of idea behind the name as a whole was, every piece is a part of the whole, like a fraction is, and that includes you. And so, it includes me and you and whoever. And it's sort of like, okay, this is some supplemental income. This goes to help support a livelihood. It goes to help support Levi the Poet as a project. And then also hopefully it, acts as a place that supports the people who are a part of it. And, as of now, I've gone through we just entered the third year of doing it. I've made a lot of changes, and I'm honestly going to make some more. But we've got, it includes a bunch of extra weekly writing from me. It includes, we've got their own store. Like, we've got this Discord server that we're using as our club platform, where there's like a social community aspect to it and things like that. And poem a day, I wanted to start doing like an essay or an article or a poem or a think piece or something like that a week and actually be the writer that I said that I was. So started doing that stuff, and then eventually kind of built up these other kind of community things around it. And it's been cool. Like, and I think, I don't know exactly the language that I'm going to use for all of it going forward. It might actually end up looking more Patreon-ish than it ever has, just as I'm making some changes and trying to sort out these transitions. But yeah, as of now, it's like, if you want to be a part of supporting this thing in a different and unique way, then here's an option for you. But also, I think the reason I didn't go the donation route in the beginning and treated it more like a product was just because I just don't really like making people feel obliged to make me keep going. You know what I mean? It's just like, but like I said, at the same time, I mean, I'm switching some stuff around, and it may very well just start kind of using some of that language, as that's certainly what it is. Yeah. But I always, whether it was the Kickstarter or Fraction, I just kind of always wanted to do my best to say, hey, like, this is a decision I'm making. You're not obliged to, you know,
I can't force you. Yeah.
So it's like, you know, we have some funny interactions. I mean, people have come and go. There's been a bunch of folks who were there who aren't there. And it's like, yeah, no hard feelings. If you want to come check it out, fantastic. It's helpful for a while, and be a part of it if you want to. So
that's awesome, man.
That's that. And all of that stuff is on the website, and there's more to come there. But that's sort of, I would say, the main creative outlet here recently for Levi the Poet, as I have taken a step back from, you know, booking another tour right now or something. I'm pretty active there still. And so we'll see how that continues to unfold and how I make certain things public and whatnot. But it's definitely a thing that is happening right now. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, I'll for sure link all this in the show notes. But again, thank you so much for being on the podcast and for just being willing to share your thoughts and your perspective on life. So really appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, you bet, man. Thanks, Sam. Right. Appreciate it.
I'll talk to you later, man.
Wow, I loved having Levi on the podcast. He is so wise and thoughtful. He's so careful with his words. And as you could hear, I have long been a fan of his work and his writing, and for good reason. He's one of the best. So make sure you go check out what he does and follow along with his work. You can visit levithepoet.net. That link is in our show notes as well, as long as the book that he read from and the book that he mentioned as well. And while you're on the internet, go stop by writtentospeak.com. I have some new blog posts up, and soon we will be sharing some information about my upcoming book, I'm All Over the Place. But thank you for joining me for another episode of the Written to Speak podcast. Make sure you hit subscribe, leave a 5-star review, 5 stars, not 4, not 3, not 2, not 1, just 5. 5 is really nice, right? If you have nothing nice to say, just don't say it at all. And hey, we will be back in a few weeks with another episode. So thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we're glad that you are here. Peace.